In early 2025, Hungary's economic direction made headlines across Europe and beyond, surprising analysts and policymakers alike. Over 65% of new foreign direct investment, an overwhelming majority, came not from traditional European partners, but from China and other BRICS nations. This marked a significant departure from the patterns that had defined Hungary's economy for years. Just a decade ago, German and French capital dominated Hungary's investment landscape, with European Union countries shaping the nation's economic future. The tables have now turned, and the old order is being upended. This isn't just a statistic, it's a clear signal of Hungary's deliberate pivot eastward, a move that's both strategic and symbolic. Prime Minister Viktor Orbán's Eastern opening policy, years in the making and often debated, is now visibly reshaping the country's alliances and economic priorities. The goal is ambitious: reduce Hungary's dependency on the West, diversify its economic partners, and tap into the dynamism and rapid growth of Asia and the global South. Today, Chinese battery plants and Russian-backed energy projects are not just investments, they're fixtures in Hungary's landscape, bringing with them not only capital but also new forms of influence and partnership. This dramatic shift challenges the European Union's unity and raises tough questions for Brussels. Is Hungary simply an outlier, or could it be the first of several member states to drift away from the EU's core? Investment is just the first wave of a much larger geopolitical transformation, one that could reshape alliances and power dynamics across the continent. To truly understand why Hungary, once so eager to join the West, is now turning east, we need to look deeper at the pressures and tensions within the EU itself. The story begins with Hungary's own complicated and sometimes turbulent history with the European Union, a relationship marked by both hope and friction. Let's rewind the clock and trace the key moments that set Hungary on this path of divergence to understand how we arrived at this pivotal moment. Hungary's entry into the EU in 2004 was a national celebration, a return to the West after decades under Soviet rule. The streets were filled with joy and hope as Hungarians looked forward to a brighter future, embracing the promise of a new era. EU membership promised prosperity, stability, and democratic reforms. It was seen as a gateway to modernization and a chance to align with Western Europe's economic and political standards. For years, Hungary thrived. EU funds built highways, citizens traveled freely, and the economy boomed, especially through ties with Germany. The open borders and economic integration brought unprecedented opportunities for growth and development. But the 2008 financial crisis exposed vulnerabilities and led to unpopular austerity. The economic downturn shook the nation's confidence, revealing the fragility of its newfound prosperity. Viktor Orbán's Fidesz party swept to power in 2010, channeling growing disillusionment. His victory marked a shift in Hungary's political landscape, as many citizens sought change and a new direction. Orbán accused Brussels of overreach, claiming the EU was infringing on Hungary's sovereignty and identity. This rhetoric struck a chord with many Hungarians who felt their national identity was under threat. This narrative resonated, fueling a decade of conflict with the EU over issues like media freedom and judicial independence. The tensions highlighted the growing divide between Hungary and the EU's core values. Brussels responded with legal action and threats to withhold funding. The EU's measures were aimed at ensuring compliance with its democratic principles, but they also deepened the rift. Orbán framed these clashes as proof of EU interference, justifying his search for new partners who wouldn't lecture Hungary on democracy. He argued for a more independent foreign policy, seeking alliances that respected Hungary's choices. The rift widened, setting the stage for Hungary's eastward turn. Orbán's government began exploring relationships with countries outside the EU, looking for economic and political support. The question: could Hungary thrive by forging its own path? This question loomed large as the nation considered its future outside the EU's influence. That's what Orbán set out to prove. His vision was to demonstrate that Hungary could succeed independently, without relying on EU directives. And he had a plan. Orbán's strategy involved building new partnerships and strengthening Hungary's position on the global stage, aiming to secure a prosperous future for the nation. Viktor Orbán's political strategy is clear. He has built his leadership on a foundation of strong, unapologetic nationalism, positioning himself as the defender of Hungary's unique identity and interests. His approach is to defend Hungarian sovereignty by firmly rejecting the EU's liberal values, which he argues threaten the nation's traditions and independence. Orbán champions what he calls an illiberal democracy, where national identity and Christian heritage are prioritized above multiculturalism and globalist ideals. He often invokes Hungary's history and culture to rally support. This stance inevitably creates constant friction with Brussels, but for Orbán, these clashes are politically useful at home, fueling a narrative of resistance. Every criticism from the EU is framed as an attack on Hungary itself, reinforcing Orbán's image as a protector and strengthening his support among voters who feel misunderstood by the West. Enter the BRICS. China and Russia offer economic deals with no strings attached, providing Hungary with investment and trade opportunities without lectures on democracy or conditions on human rights. By deepening ties with these rising powers, Orbán gains leverage in EU negotiations, signaling that Hungary is not dependent on Brussels alone. Hungary's message to the world is clear: we have options, and we refuse to be isolated or pressured into conformity. This East-West balancing act allows Hungary to punch above its weight in Europe, making it a key player in regional politics. Orbán envisions a multipolar world, where Hungary can freely choose its partners based on pragmatic interests, not just shared values or ideology. For him, aligning with rising powers is not just an option, but a strategic necessity to secure Hungary's future in a changing world. It's not a rejection of Europe itself, but a rejection of the EU's current integration model, which Orbán sees as incompatible with Hungary's interests. Ultimately, it's a calculated gamble on a different future, one where Hungary charts its own course, balancing East and West to maximize its influence and independence. Hungary's eastern opening isn't just political, it's economic strategy. The government argues that over-reliance on the EU, especially Germany, is risky. A slowdown in German industry could devastate Hungarian jobs. BRICS nations, especially China, offer new growth engines. Chinese investment in electric vehicle batteries positions Hungary as a key player in Europe's green transition. Eastern partners bring capital with fewer conditions. No lengthy EU oversight, no rule of law strings. Fast-tracked projects like the Chinese-financed Budapest-Belgrade Railway fit Orbán's vision of state-led development. Energy is another driver. Hungary remains reliant on Russian gas and nuclear power, defying EU efforts to cut ties. For Orbán, stable energy and industrial growth trump EU alignment. The Eastern pivot is about survival and opportunity. The numbers tell the story. Hungary's trade with China has more than doubled since 2015 now, over 12% of total trade. Chinese investment, over 15 billion euros in battery plants, dwarfs that from any single European country. These projects create jobs, especially in eastern Hungary, and the government touts them as proof of success. Meanwhile, relations with Western investors have cooled. Special taxes and legal uncertainty have made some EU companies wary. With EU funds frozen over rule of law disputes, Chinese capital fills the gap. Hungary now runs a dual-track economy, traditional manufacturing tied to Germany, and high-tech China-backed industries. The challenge balancing these tracks without alienating either side. Hungary is betting it can bridge East and West and profit from both. Hungary's infrastructure map reveals its new orientation. EU-funded projects once connected Hungary westward: roads, schools, and water systems. But recent years have seen a new axis. The Chinese-built Budapest-Belgrade Railway, part of Beijing's Belt and Road, points south and east. Chinese gigafactories cluster in eastern cities, supplying German car makers with batteries. German industry now relies on Chinese technology, funneled through Hungary. Energy links tell the same story. Russian gas pipelines and the Rosatom-led Pax nuclear expansion anchor Hungary to the east. The country is becoming a hub where Russian energy, Chinese capital, and European manufacturing converge. This isn't an exit from the EU, but a fundamental rewiring of Hungary's role within it. Hungary is building alternative connections, reshaping its future and the EU's internal balance. The question, can it sustain this balancing act? The answer will shape Europe's next chapter. The stakes are high. Hungary faces a stark choice: the deep, stable partnership of the EU, or the flexible, transactional ties of BRICS. The EU offers market access, legal stability, and development funds, engines of Hungary's modernization. But Brussels' demands on rule of law and values are seen as intrusive by Orbán's government. BRICS, especially China, offer investment and markets with no political strings. For a government focused on sovereignty, this is appealing. But BRICS is a loose club. No single market, no shared legal framework, and plenty of internal rivalries. Over-reliance on China and Russia brings risks, economic dependency, exposure to sanctions, and potential isolation from the West. In the EU, Hungary is a key player. In BRICS, it's a small fish. The trade-off: more freedom but less security and influence. Hungary is trying to have it both ways, but can it last? Hungary's pivot is a high-stakes gamble. The reward becoming a central hub in a new Eurasian order, blending German industry, Chinese tech, and Russian energy. Success would validate Orbán's vision and give Hungary outsized influence, but the risks are real. Alienating the EU could mean lost funds and political isolation. Overdependence on China and Russia brings new vulnerabilities, economic, political, and social. Social tensions are rising over foreign workers and environmental concerns tied to new factories. Critics warn Hungary could become a workbench for foreign powers, not a true innovator. The biggest risk miscalculating the EU's tolerance. If Brussels cracks down, Hungary could be left exposed, caught between two worlds, belonging fully to neither. The gamble reaped the benefits of both East and West, without the obligations. But that may not be sustainable. As of September 2025, Hungary stands at a crossroads. Still in the EU and NATO, it's pulled eastward by Chinese investment and Russian energy. The country is a living experiment in geopolitical balancing, part of one club, courting its rivals. Supporters see a bold, pragmatic path to prosperity and sovereignty. Critics warn of isolation and dependency on authoritarian regimes. Hungary's dual identity, anchored in Europe, oriented to the East, can't last forever without friction. The contradiction is growing with every new factory and gas deal. Is Hungary pioneering a new model for small states in a multipolar world? Or is it drifting from the West, risking its security and values for short-term gain? The answer will shape not just Hungary's future but the fate of the European Union itself.